Masechet Baba Kama, Daf Tet Zayin. We have a long Mishnah that's going to involve us from to the end of this Perek and into the next Perek. The next Perek is going to elaborate in the Mishnayot on all the sections of this Mishnah. This Mishnah itself has multiple sections that we're going to have to keep track of. So here we go. Chamisha Tamim v'chamisha Mu'adim. There are 5 examples of Tam animals that would pay half, and 5 examples of mu'ad animals that would pay a full amount. And again, this difference between tam and mu'ad applies only to goring, that is keren. Okay, now we're going to have to identify what are the 5, what 5 is it talking about? So we'll see a few in the Gemara, a couple of different ways to read this Mishnah. So let's see. Habema ena moedet lo ligach velo ligof velo lishoch velo lidbos velo libot. So an animal is not considered forewarned, meaning it's considered tam from at the beginning, from when it's born. It's not a usual activity for it to do the following 5 things. It generally does not gore, push, bite, crouch, or kick. Those are the 5 things that would be considered tam for those activities, unless it does it many times. But if it didn't do it many times, and it was not forewarned, that's tam, and it would pay half. Okay, I'm trying to read the Mishnah simply and the way the Gemara at first assumes that it is read. So that's the 5 tam. And now the 5 mu'ad examples are, number 1, Hashen mu'adet lecholeta ra'ui la. So if an animal goes and eats in someone else's field, because shen does not apply in the Shut Harabim, right? The goring is in the Shut Harabim. We're going to get into this more exactly where this is talking about. But shen, let's assume, is in the land of the Nizak, and even the first time it does it, you already have to pay a full amount. It's forewarned regarding shen because that's a usual activity. And similarly, if an animal is walking and it breaks things while it's walking, it also have to pay a full amount because that's what it does. Again, in the Shut Harabim, it's okay because you shouldn't leave things in the middle of Shut Harabim. But if it's in private property, then it's my ox. It's my ox. Then I'm fully responsible. That's number 2. 3 is v'shod hamu'ad. Shod mu'ad. This is for goring. In other words, if any of these activities, which are all under the category of goring, and it does it many times, and it's forewarned, then this turns into the category of mu'ad. That's 3rd. 4th, shod hamazik b'shut hanizak, a shod that causes damage by goring in the property of the nizak. Even if it didn't do it before, it's a short tam in terms of being in the Shut Harabim, it would only pay half. But if it's in the property of the nizak, so then the nizak says, who asked you to bring your short into here? This is my private property. Then I have to be more careful. If I allow my ox to go into someone else's property and it causes damage even in a goring way, which is unusual, still I am fully responsible. As 4th and 5th is ha'adam. Human beings are always forewarned. We have brains. We have to know right and wrong, and no one needs to warn us and say, hey, you shouldn't punch people, you shouldn't cause damage, don't do that again. Human beings are considered forewarned. All right, so that is the simple way of reading this Mishnah, that there's 5 tam and 5 mu'ad, and the first paragraph is all the tam animals, and then the second paragraph are the mu'ad examples, even though there is overlap, but this is talking about if it does goring and it didn't do it before, but here it includes shen and regel, which is different from goring, and then the other example, the shod mu'ad and shemazik are goring, but they're in particular cases of it already did it many times, or in the Shut HaNizak, then it is considered forewarned, has to pay a full amount. Whereas this, the first paragraph is talking about where it was not forewarned, and it's in the Shut Harabim. All right, so that's going to be our first reading of the Mishnah. And that's the first 2 paragraphs. Then we have another add-on paragraph that talks about other items. So this presumably is not part of the 5 and 5 count there. And it says, v'haze'eh, v'ha'ari, v'ha'do, v'ha'named, v'ha'badelas, v'ha'nachash, hare'elu mu'adin. Yeah, these are 6 items, so this wouldn't fit with the 5 anyway. So this is a separate list. Now, when we talked about the distinction above between shod tam and shod mu'ad, that's talking about domesticated animals like an ox or for other domesticated animals like sheep and goats. Domesticated animals cannot live without humans. Things like sheep, these evolved together with human beings. If you leave a sheep out in the wild, it will die immediately. Something will come and eat it. Also, it needs to be sheared. They don't go to the barber. They can't shear themselves, right? They depend on human beings, and human beings depend on these animals. They use them for food and for work in the field. So those are domesticated, and therefore they're easier controlled by human beings. But these following are wild animals, and therefore, that by definition, they are wild and dangerous. And so that includes a wolf and a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a bardelas might be a cheetah, a hyena, that are quite scary. Some say a marten or a polecat. Polecat doesn't look quite that scary, at least not in this picture, but it is in any case a wild animal. And also a snake. So these are mu'adin. If I own one of these and it causes damage, I can't say, I didn't know my lion was going to go and eat your sheep, right? Bad lion. Okay, now thanks for letting me know. You can't say that because that's its nature is to be violent and cause damage. Rabbi Elazar says about 5 of these, the first 5 of them, if they are cultured, right? You take your lion or wolf to the opera and you tame it. There are such things as lion tamers and bear tamers. And so if you have that kind of bear and you're able to acculturate it, domesticate it, even though they're not really domesticated animals, but if so, then they're not forewarned. In other words, if they don't have any history, they have a history of being calm and tame, then you're not 100% responsible. It'll be like a short Tame. However, Rabbi Elazar agrees that a snake is always forewarned. There's no way to tame a snake. Okay, very interesting. Now, a question on the beginning of the Mishnah. B'tikatane השן מועדת לאכול מכלל דבחסר הנזק עסקינן וקטנה בהמה אינה מועדת לשלם כולה אבל חסי נזק משלמת מנה רבנן היא דמרי משונה קרן בחסר הנזק חסי נזק הוא דמשלם. So the opening, we're assuming first of all that the 5 and 5 is talking about the first paragraph are Tame and the second paragraph are the Mu'ad, and so therefore the first and second paragraph are linked with each other, and therefore they should all be talking about the same case. Now, since it says over here that shen is mu'ad, you have to pay full amount for shen if it eats what is appropriate to it. That eating appropriate to it means eating things that animals usually eat. So since it talks about that, well, where is that true that a shen would have to pay? Mu'ad lechol. That means it's talking about in the property of the nizak, because if my animal goes and eats some produce in the Shut Harabim, I would not be liable. So therefore, we can assume that the second paragraph is the Shut HaNizak. Good. Now, the first paragraph that says behema is not mu'edet, is to pay all of it, but it does pay some of it, right? That would be the first paragraph that said here, behema ena mu'edet lo ligach. Behema is considered tam when it comes to goring, so that doesn't have to pay everything, but it does have to pay something. That's why it's listed here at all. So you have to pay chasi nezik. So now we see that since the second paragraph is talking about the Shut HaNizak, that means, and it's linked to the first paragraph because it's 5 and 5. It's linked by the heading, and therefore the first paragraph is also the Shut HaNizak, and it says in the Shut HaNizak, a shor tam will pay only half. Well, whose opinion is that? Mane Rabbanani damre mishuna keren b'chasar nizak chasinezek hu dimshalem. Yeah, you see, there's a machloket. Everyone agrees in Reshut Harabim that the distinction between tam and mu'ad for goring, that tam is half and mu'ad is whole. But there is a machloket whether that also applies to Reshut HaNizak. Rabbanan say it does, right? And they say keren is when an animal does something in an unusual way, mishuna, and if that happens in Reshut HaNizak, then the owner of the goring ox pays only half. And so that the first paragraph here, we're assuming the whole Mishnah is about Reshut HaNizak, and the first paragraph says that he pays only half, is considered tam. So the first paragraph must be Rabbanan. So far, so good. Here's the problem. Ema sefa, shor mu'ad, v'shor mazik, b'shut hanizak, v'adam, atan l'rebi tarfon, damar mishuna, keren, b'chasad hanizak, nezek shalem, hu demishalem. The second paragraph, enlisting the 5 things that are mu'ad, says shor mu'ad. Okay, that could be in the Shut Rabim, anywhere. If it's mu'ad, then you pay a full amount. But the next thing is the shor of the mazik that's found in the domain of the nizak. And this is an example of mu'ad, where you pay a full amount. Well, if you pay a full amount in the Shut HaNizak, that is talking about, that's assuming the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, who says that the unusual act of goring in the Shut HaNizak, one pays full amount. So what's going on here? Resha Rabbanan v'sefa Rabbi Tarfon. It seems like the first paragraph is Rabbanan, that assumes in the Shut HaNizak you pay only half. And the second paragraph is Rabbi Tarfon, that says in the Shut HaNizak you pay a full amount for goring. So how could we have 2 paragraphs back to back with different authors? And the answer is in דהאמר לשמואל רב יהודה שיננה שבוק מתניתין ותא אבטרי רשע רבנן וספא רבי טרפון. Indeed, Shemuel told his student Rav Yehuda, sharp one. That was a nickname for Rav Yehuda, who was very sharp. Right? It says, forget the Mishnah and come follow me. In other words, don't forget the Mishnah. Forget your difficulty about the Mishnah and here follow my interpretation. In fact, this Mishnah is compound. The first paragraph is the opinion of Rabbanan, and the second paragraph is Rabbi Tarfon. I know it doesn't say names here, but it's putting it together to give a list of, all things that people consider tam, and all things that someone considers mu'ad, and even though it's not, there's machloket between what should belong in the first and what belongs in the second. So still the Mishnah wanted to include lots of cases that, according to Rabbanan, this case would be tam. According to Bitarfon, it would belong in the second paragraph of Mu'ad. And yes, that's a plausible reading of the Mishnah. Okay, that's interpretation number 1 of the Mishnah. Now we're going to see a second one. Rabbi Elazar Mishmeh de Rav Amar. Kula Rabbi Tarfon. I can explain the entire Mishnah according to Rabbi Tarfon, that says there's full payment for in the Shut HaNizak. הרשע בחסר המיוחדת לפירות לאחד מהן ולזה ולזה לשברים ולגבי שן הביאה לה חסר הנזק ולגבי קרן הביאה רשות הרבים. Rabbi Elazar explains that in fact we can explain the entire Mishnah is all according to the Bitarfon, that if it was in the Shut HaNizak then you'd have to pay the full amount no matter what. Now how do you explain the first paragraph versus the second paragraph? In fact, both of these paragraphs, that's what it means this is Resha, as opposed to the one about wild animals. The first 2 paragraphs are talking about the following case of a courtyard that belongs to only one of them, only to the Nizak, with regard to the right to put produce there. But it belongs to both of them with regard to the right to bring their oxen there. Since it belongs to only one of them had the right to bring their produce there. When it comes to Shen, my animal, going in there, which I was allowed to bring the animal in there, but only you had exclusive right to have your fruit there, and therefore, when it comes to Shen, which is particular damage to your fruit, that's considered the same as Chasar HaNizak. Since you have exclusive right to bring your fruit there, so therefore I'm responsible as if it were solely your property, and that explains why in this part Shen Mu'ad Le'achol that's considered Mu'ad, and that's because if it was Reshut HaRabim, Shen does not apply. So therefore that has to be Reshut HaNizak because you have exclusive right to it. However, regarding Keren, it's considered Reshut HaRabim because it belongs to both of us. It's not actually a public domain. It's a shared domain. Me and you share it, but we both have a right to bring our oxen there. Since we both have a right to bring oxen, so regarding goring, it's the same as Reshut HaRabim. And even Rabbi Tarfon agrees that in Reshut HaRabim, there is a distinction between Tam and Mu'ad. And therefore, this first paragraph here is talking about when it's Tam, in a shared property, but we can both bring our oxen there, which is the same as Reshut HaRabim. I would only pay half, and then the next part is saying, oh, by the way, if it's Mu'ad or if it's actually in the Reshut HaNizak, a place where you have exclusive right totally to bring your short and for everything, and then I would have to pay a full amount. And so we can reconcile that both halves are talking about Rabbi Tarfon as long as we limit it to this particular case. Okay, that's the second interpretation. Rav Kana says, I repeated this teaching that we just saw of Rabbi Elazar in front of Rav Zevid, who lived in Nehar De'ah. ואמר לי, מי מסית מוקמת לה כולה כרבי טרפון, הקטנה, השן מועדת לאכול את הראוי לה, ראוי לה אין שאין ראוי לה. ואי רבי טרפון אמר משונה קרן בחסר הנזק, נזק שלם משלם. So when Rav Zivid heard this, he said, can you really explain the entire Mishnah according to Rabbi Tarfon? Look how it says in the beginning of the second paragraph, when regarding Shen, it says, Shen is considered forewarned only if my ox that's eating your produce is eating that which is fitting for it to eat, meaning usual food, which is the usual way of it causing damage through Shen. So that means it's liable to pay a full amount only if it's eating what it normally eats, doing its normal activity. But that implies that if it's eating unusual food, things that it doesn't usually eat, then I would not pay a full amount. Now, if it's Rabbi Tarfon, he says that eating something that is unusual, that falls into the category of keren, of goring, even though it's eating, but the definition of shen is not simply that it's eating. The definition of shen is something that the animal regularly does. It's a normal thing for an animal to do, so it's a normal way of it causing damage. Whereas an unusual way of causing damage is categorized under shen, because animals don't usually gore. So if it's a Rabbi Tarfon, why would you have to add this limitation? It says shen is liable if it's eating that which it usually eats. According to the Rabbi Tarfon, even if it eats something that it doesn't usually eat, so what? So that would be goring. According to Rabbi Tarfon, if it's in the Shut HaNizak, then he still pays a full amount. So it wouldn't have to add only if it eats that which it is accustomed to. So therefore, Rav Zevid rejects the opinion of Rabbi Elazar and offers a third interpretation of this Mishnah. Ela le'olam Rabbanan hi. In fact, we can explain the whole Mishnah according to Rabbanan, who says that in the Shut HaNizak, goring would be half payment. And also, we have to fill in some words. And this is what it means. Hamishat tamim hen ve'im hu'adu hamishatan mu'adin. In fact, the opening line over here is not referring to paragraph 1 and then paragraph 2, but rather this 5 and 5 are all referring to the first paragraph. And it was saying, these 5, if they never had a history, they're Tame. If they'd had a history of doing it before and we warned the owner, then they are Mu'ad. So that's all referring to 5. And then, finished paragraph, new topic, new unit. Here's another set of things, another laws. But by doing that, we're unlinking the first 2 paragraphs. So in fact, they can be talking about different cases. And so here's what it means, right? It means that there are 5 things that are tam, and those very 5 things, if they were forewarned, they would be mu'ad. And now, new paragraph, Shen veregel mu'adin mitechilatan, vehechan hadatan b'chasar hanizak. Shen and regel, they are mu'ad from the beginning. And where would they be, where would one be liable for as forewarned animals, in which case you'd have to pay? And if it's in chatzar hanizak. In other words, here's how we're explaining this Mishnah. The beginning is its own paragraph, right? There's 5 things that are tam, and these are shor, that gores, and all these 5 are types of goring, because they're all unusual. And here, if the animal, and this is all in the Shut HaRabim, although this is all according to Rabbanan, so it could be in the Shut HaNizak, it really doesn't matter where. And if it's tam, then we're going to pay half. And these 5, if they are mu'ad, then you'd pay a full amount. Okay, that's case number 1, and this is the 5 and the 5, the here themselves. Now, the next paragraph says, not talking about, first paragraph is about goring. The second paragraph is entirely not about goring. And this just talking about shen and regel. And then the next two are also about Shen and Regel, and says, listen, regarding Shen and Regel, Shor is considered Mu'ad, and this type of payment only applies in the Reshut HaNizak, in the domain of the Nizak. So these are all explanations of Shen and Regel. And this too has to be Rabbanan, because it says only if it takes what is fitting for it, where it does it in a usual way. But if it was in an unusual way, if it's eating unusual food, then that would actually fit under Keren, which according to Rabbanan, where in the Reshut HaNizak would be only half payment. And so you see, this cannot be the Bitarfon. Therefore, the entirety of the Mishnah is explainable as Rabbanan, as long as you're willing to say that the Tam and Mu'ad here of goring is one thing, and this whole paragraph is talking about Shen and Regel, including this line here. Okay, so this is this reading, and we are going to now challenge it because of this line, Shor Mazik B'Shut HaNizak. If we say that this is talking about Shen and Regel, we're going to run into a problem. Matkif la Ravina, Ha-Katani lekaman, Shor Mazik B'Shut HaNizak Kesad. Later on, this is on Adaf Kaf Dalid, in the next perek, that in the next perek it's going to elaborate on all the different cases in this Mishnah. And over there, it's going to get to this line of Shor Mazik B'Shut HaNizak, and it says, how so? Let's give some examples. And it gives examples of goring. See, of goring. Now, if you say that the second paragraph in our Mishnah, that line, Shor Mazik B'Shut HaNizak, is talking about goring, which was the original interpretation and seems to be the simple reading if you read 5 and 5. So this talking about goring, then that Mishnah makes sense. Mishum hachi katani kesad. That's why it says later on, how so? And it gives examples of goring. Eli amart la'idi ba my kesad. But if this line, if the whole second paragraph is talking about Shen and Regel, and Shor Mazik B'Shut HaNizak is talking about Shen and Regel only and not goring, then how could you explain that Mishnah later, where it says an example of this line is in fact goring? And therefore, sorry, this second explanation is rejected. Ela amar Ravina hasura mechasra v'hachi katane. Sorry, that was the third one. The first one is that the Hudesha and Sefa are different authors. The second interpretation was it's all Rabbi Tarfon. The third one is that was all Rabbanan. And now we have a fourth explanation of the Mishnah. According to this explanation, the Mishnah actually, as we're going to see, is both according to Rabbanan and Rabbi Tarfon. It's going to explain where they are different in the middle of it. So, Ela Amar Ravina, Chasura Mechasra V'Achi Katane. Yes, so this Ravina also has to say there's missing words, or we have to insert more interpretation into the Mishnah. A lot of this is going to be similar to the previous one. This is all the same so far. Chamishat tamim hem v'im huadu chamishetan mo'adin. The opening, the first paragraph, all five, the opening line is referring only to the first paragraph. There are 5 animals that initially they are tam, but if they do it repeatedly, then they will become mu'ad. So that's the first paragraph, the 5 types of goring. That's the first paragraph. Second paragraph, V'shen v'regel mu'adin mitechilatan. And Shen and Regel, however, are never tam. They start off as being mu'ad. This is still the same as the previous interpretation. Now here's where it gets different. V'zehu shor hamu'ad. And these are cases where everybody would agree that it is mu'ad. There's no distinction between tam and mu'ad. For Shen and Regel, you have to pay the full amount. However, Shor Mazik B'Shut HaNizak, if, now going back to goring, if it is goring in the property of the Nizak, there we have a machloket, the Bitarfon and Rabbanan. In other words, if we look back here at the original wording, right? So you have the first paragraph, that's the 5 and 5, where it makes a distinction between Tam and Mu'ad. And then let's know that Shen and Regel, they are Mu'ad from the beginning. That's why they're Shor HaMu'ad. No matter what, they're always Shor HaMu'ad. And then, period. There's another category here of Shor Mazik B'Shut HaNizak, where that would be a machloket between Rabbanan and the Bitarfon. So that's a different category. And then Adam is yet another category, right? So these, because the 5 and 5 are only referring to here, so then the rest are all other lists of different types of damages that each have their own characteristics, and the characteristic of this one here is that it is subject to a machloket, and even though machloket is not all here, we're just listing it, and the point of this Mishnah is to be a bunch of bullet points, because we are going to elaborate on every line of every phrase in the next paragraph, so that's okay. That's that line. And then look how Ravina is brilliant, because he's explaining not only these two paragraphs but even the next one, because the next one says V'yesh mu'adim achirim kayoseh be'elu, and besides these cases of mu'ad, there are yet other cases of mu'ad, and those are ze'ev, ha'ari, v'hadov, ha'bardeles, v'hanamer, v'hanachash, and these are always mu'adim, unlike the first paragraph that they can be tam, they start off as tam and they become mu'ad. These are mu'ad, from their birth. Good. So that is Ravina's fourth and last explanation. And in case you think that we're forcing ourselves back into it, actually, Tanyana Mehachi, we have a Braita that says exactly this. This is a Braita that's expanding and explaining our Mishnah. And it says, Chamishat tamim hem, v'mu'adu chamishitan mu'adin. There are 5 types of activities that if an animal, a domesticated animal does them, they'd be tam and you only have to pay half. Although those very animals, if they are forewarned and they do those activities, then it would be mu'ad, you have to pay the whole amount. Next, shen veregel mu'adim metchilatan vezeu shora mu'ad. Regarding shen and regel, those very same all animals are forewarned from their birth, and everyone agrees that those are considered shora mu'ad. Another category, shora mazik b'shut hanizak machloket bitarfon v'rabanan. If it has to do with goring or some unusual type of damage, and it's in the property of the nizak, that's going to be a machloket bitarfon and rabanan, which will be elaborated upon in the next perek. ויש מועדים אחרים כיוצא באלו, הזאב, והארי, והדוב, והנמר, והברדלס, והנחש, and there are another bunch of animals that are mu'ad no matter what. That statement of Ravina as being a fourth explanation of our Mishnah, that was one version of what he said, but there is another version that Ravina actually was coming in response to a contradiction within the Mishnah, as follows. So it's the same statement of Ravina, but he was answering a different question. It'll end up being the same interpretation of our Mishnah, but answering a different problem, which is Tenan chamisha tamim chamisha muadim v'tuleka va'ika hazeh v'ha'ari v'hadov v'hanamer v'bardelas v'nachash. In the beginning of the Mishnah, it says there are 5 animals that are tam and 5 animals that are mu'ad, and that's it. There's only 5 animals that are mu'ad, or 5 scenarios that are mu'ad, and that's it. But look at the end of that Mishnah where it lists 6 different animals that are all mu'ad. So it should have listed many more types of scenarios and animals that are mu'ad. So how can you explain the contradiction between the beginning that says only 5 and then the end that lists a lot more? Ravina explains, you have to insert the following glosses to explain. There are 5 animals that start off when they're born being tam, but only if they have a history, then they become mu'ad. And it's not 5 animals, 5 actions that if domesticated animals do, then they can switch from tam to mu'ad, and those are the following actions. V'shen v'regel mu'adin metchilatan v'zeu shor ha'mu'ad. And so these are the actions. Are all regarding goring. And then the Mishnah goes on and says, and by the way, there's shen veregel, that even a shor is going to be mu'ad from its beginning, and all that is talking about a shor. Good. If it ends up talking about goring, and it's not in Shut Rabim, but rather in the Shut HaNizak, that's going to be a machloket. Good. So all that was the different cases where a shor, a domesticated animal, could be tam and could be mu'ad. And then there's another category. And yet there are other animals that also are mu'ad, but they're mu'ad all the time, and then it lists the other 6 animals. So you see that Ravina's answer is very good, because not only does it answer the original question we had, is this a bitafon or rabbanan, but it also answers this question of the seeming contradiction between the beginning and the end of the Mishnah. And furthermore, there's a Braita that says exactly the same words. So Ravina solves a lot of problems. We now go back to the beginning of the Mishnah and explain velo lidbos. When the Mishnah says that a shod is not mu'ad in terms of crouching. In other words, if it does damage by crouching, that's a subsidiary of keren, and there's an unusual act for it to purposely crouch to destroy something, and therefore that is a shod tam the first 3 times it does it. Amar Rabbi Elazar, lo shanu ela pachin gedolim, aval pachin ketanim orchehu. Rabbi Elazar limits the Mishnah's leniency and says this is only if it's a large vessel. That's weird for an animal to purposely destroy a large vessel by crouching on it. But if it's a small vessel, then that is its usual way, and therefore it would not be called tam. That would be in the category of trampling of regel. Lema Misea Ale, seems that we should be able to support Rabbi Elazar's statement from the following baraita that says, "Abehema mu'edet lalech kedarka ul shaber ul ma'echet ha'adam ve'eta behema ve'eta kelim." An animal is considered mu'ad if it's walking in its usual way, so that it can go break or crush a person or an animal or vessels. And so here, this is talking about crushing vessels. And yet it says that the animal is mu'ad. So this seems to be a contradiction to what we just said before, if you say it's talking about whole vessels. However, if the Mishnah is talking about only large vessels, and this Baraita is talking about small vessels, and saying that it is the usual way for it to destroy small vessels, and that's why it's considered mu'ad, because that would be like regel, and so this could support what Rabbi Elazar said, but we answer not necessarily. Dilma min hasad. Maybe over here when it's talking about crushing, it's talking about crushing from its side. It crushes them as it's going against a wall and smashing them, not necessarily by crouching on top of them. So it could be that it's not talking about crouching at all, and therefore it's not necessarily a proof. All right, that's all one version of that discussion. Another version that's very similar. Amar Rabbi Elazar, lo tema pachin gedolim hu delav orche, aval pachin ketanim orchehu, ela afilu pachin ketanim name lav orchehu. Okay, similar topic, but actually a different conclusion according to this. Rabbi Elazar does not want to limit the Mishnah, and he says, don't think that the Mishnah is only talking about large vessels, where it's definitely not its way, but you might think that small vessels, that is a way of animals to destroy small vessels by crouching on them. No, don't say that. It's not true. Even small vessels, it's not its way. Animals don't crouch upon big or small vessels, and therefore it will be considered a short tam, no matter what. We challenge that now with that braita metibe ul marechet ha'adam ve'eta behema ve'eta kelim. Hold on, here it says that an animal is considered mu'ad when it comes to crushing a person or animals or vessels. So here it's mu'ad, which sounds like that it is a usual way. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Dilma min hasad. Rabbi Elazar says, no, this is talking about where it's, Rabbi Elazar could answer this, so because it's in contradiction, that this Baraita is talking about where it crushes it on its side as it's walking past near a wall. That is a usual way, and therefore that's considered mu'ad. But crouching on it, no matter how big it is considered an unusual way. A third version of that same discussion, those some start off with a contradiction and use Rabbi Elazar as an answer. Tenan velo lidbots. Our Mishnah says Mishnah is considered tam when it comes to crouching. Hold on, the Baraita says crushing all these things, including vessels, is considered mu'ad. Amar Rabbi Elazar lakashya kan befachin gedolim kan befachin ged ketanim. Rabbi Elazar says not a problem. Mishnah is talking about large vessels. That's unusual, and therefore that's like keren, which we consider a tam. Whereas the Baraita is talking about small vessels, and that is its usual way. Okay, Mishnah mentioned a whole bunch of animals that are wild, hazev, hari, and so on. So, my bardelas, what does bardelas refer to? Amar Rav Yehuda nafreza, he says nafreza. My nafreza, what is nafreza? We don't know what that is either. Amar Rav Yosef apa, it's an apa. It's a type of hyena. Now we have a challenge to this, to Rav Yosef's identification of the bardelas and the hainina and the Mishnah with an apa, because look at this Baraita, Metibe, Rabbi Meir omer afa saboa, Rabbi Elazar omer afa nachash, Amar Rav Yosef saboa zo apa. We have a Baraita that adds a couple of things to the Mishnah, that Rabbi Meir says, in addition to the wild animals listed in the Mishnah, we should add also a saboa, a hyena. And Rabbi Elazar adds the snake. And Rav Yosef said, what is a savoa? It's an apa. So he's identifying it as a hyena. So here's the question. Rav Yosef has two identifications. Over here he says that a bardelas is an apa, and there he says that a savoa is an apa. Well, which one is it, right? Why are you calling this, why would you add a hyena twice if a bardelas is already an apa, and that's mentioned in the Mishnah? Then what does that mean that Rabbi Meir is saying also the savoa, then that's also an apa? Why would you add an apa if an apa is already mentioned in the Mishnah? And the answer is like kashya, kan besavoa zachar, kan besavoa nekeva. No, they're talking about different kinds. The Baraita of Rabbi Meir is talking about a male hyena, whereas the Mishnah was already included a female hyena. They're different, and you might have thought that maybe only the female hyena is wild but not the male, and so Rabbi Meir says also the savoa, which is the male hyena, and so that's what he's coming to add. Tanya. And how do we know anything about this, the male hyena, and how it's also wild? Because look what this Braita says about it. Savoa zachar lachar sheva shanim nasa atalef. Atalef lachar sheva shanim nase arpad. Arpad lachar sheva shanim nasa kimosh. Kimosh lachar sheva shanim nasa hoach. Hoach lachar sheva shanim nasa shed. Period. Shidro shel adam lachar sheva shanim nasa nachash, v'hanemile dela kara b'modim. You see that there's a distinction between the male and female hyenas because, look, a savoa, zachar, a male hyena, after 7 years can metamorphose somehow into a bat that eats insects. And after 7 other years, it turns into a bat that eats, is herbivorous. A herbivorous bat of 7 years turns into a thistle, which turns into a briar and different kinds of thorns. And a briar after 7 years turns into a demon. So you see from this Baraita that the savoa zachar in particular is very dangerous and is different from if it was the same, it should just say savoa. But specifically a savoa zachar has this characteristic that it can turn into all these other dangerous items, and therefore needs to be listed separately. Okay, there is no scientific basis that we know of that these things turn into each other, but I think the idea of it is not meant to be literal, but rather that all these things are very dangerous, and it's equating the danger of each one of them, or maybe even becomes more and more dangerous, and in that way shows a linkage, a thematic linkage between all this, that they share this similar characteristic. And then, since we're talking about one thing turning into another, another list is that shidra, a person's spine, after he dies, supposedly, after 7 years, turns into a snake. I guess they have similar shapes and similar kind of movements. However, we qualify that's only about talking about a person who does not bow during modim. It's kind of a punishment that one is supposed to bow and rise up like a snake. If someone does not bow and rise up during modim, it means he's not being thankful, and so as a punishment for that person not showing his gratefulness to his creator, so his spine will turn into a snake. Amar Mor, Rabbi Meir Omer Af Hasaboa. Okay, now that you quoted this Baraita, let's analyze it. According to Rabbi Meir, we're adding a hyena, and Rabbi Elazar Omer Af HaNachash, Rabbi Elazar is adding a nachash. Hold on, V'hanan Tanan, Rabbi Elazar Omer Bizman Shen B'nei Tarbut, and Amuadim HaNachash Mu'ad Le'olam. In the Mishnah already, Rabbi Elazar talks about the snake, and he says, regarding all the other animals, it depends on whether they are acculturated lions and hyenas, and right, they wear tuxedos and go to the opera, and so they're very cultured and they're domesticated. Then they're considered tam, but the nachash is mu'ad for sure. So you see, in that, according to the Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar is making a distinction. He's arguing on Tanakama and just making a distinction. It says all the other ones, they can be tam or mu'ad. You have to test them out. Whereas a nachash is definitely mu'ad. However, according to the Braita, where Rabbi Elazar says also nachash, nachash. That means he's adding nachash to the list, and it would be the same as all the others. So in this baraita, he's saying nachash is the same as all the others, but here in the baraita, he's making a distinction between nachash and all the others, that a nachash is definitely, and not the others are not. So we answer, Tane nachash. You're right. In the baraita, don't erase the word af. Rabbi Elazar says nachash. In other words, according to Tanakama, all those wild animals are mu'ad for sure. There's no test. You can't acculturate them. You can't domesticate them. And so Rabbi Elazar says, I want to add nachash. That is for sure. But Rabbi Elazar, in fact, disagrees with the others and thinks that the others, it's possible to domesticate them. Amar Shemuel, Ari b'reshut harabim, daras ve'achal patur, taraf ve'achal hayav. Shemuel says a very interesting limitation about the lion. Even though it says the lion is mu'ad, well, actually it depends how he kills and how he kills his prey. When it's in the reshut harabim, if it claws its prey and it kills it by clawing and only then eats it, well, that is its usual way of eating, and therefore that's like shen and eating food that's in the reshut harabim. If an animal does that, patur, that's not a problem. He's not liable. But however, if the lion goes and taraf, it tears it apart and kills it with its teeth first and then eats it, that is an unusual way of the animal to do that, and therefore that would be under keren. Keren in the reshut harabim is hayav. So the first way, clawing and killing, since that's the usual way, that's considered shen, which is patur in reshut harabim. The unusual way of killing, that's keren, and is chayav in reshut harabim. Good. Now let's explain. Darash v'achal patur, kevan dorchel midras hava le kemo she'achla perot v'yirakot, v'ale shen b'reshut harabim u'patur, taraf lav or chayahu. If it claws it and eats it, patur, because that's its normal way to claw to death and then eat it. So it's the same as if it ate fruits and vegetables. Animals eat fruits and vegetables, and so if it does that in reshut harabim, that damage is considered normal, and therefore it's under the category of shen and is patur. Whereas if it tears it apart first with its teeth, that's unusual, that's keren, and that would be liable, and it's always mu'ad, so it would be liable the full amount. We ask, hold on, is that true that an animal killing with its teeth is not a normal way of eating? Pasuk in Nahum says a lion tears, uses the word toref, which means with its teeth, for its young. So you see, that's a normal way. We answer, no, that's bishvil gorotav. Exactly, if it's eating for itself, then it's going to use its claws and eat. That's the normal way. But here, the animal is, when it says Ariel Toref, the reason why it's using its teeth and not its claws is because it's not eating. It's actually killing it in order to bring it to its young. And so that's why this pasuk is not talking about an animal that's eating. And similarly, the rest of the pasuk that describes a lion doing things for other reasons, not for eating, not for its own consumption. Mechanek livotav, it strangles for its lioness. Bishvil livotav, that's what it means, for it. Ve'maleh teref chora bishvil chora votav terefa bishvil me'onotav, and even the rest of the pasuk, and it fills its lair with prey. That means for its lair. It's going to kill it and with teref, with its teeth, but then in order to bring it home, and it'll fill up its den with that which it tore apart. And so this is not for its immediate use, and that's why it's doing it as an unusual way. But in a usual way, when it eats, it does it by claws. V'hatanya v'chen chaya shenichnesa lahasar hanizak tarfa behema v'achla basar meshalem nezek shalem. Hold on, we have a baraita that seems to contradict this, and it says that chaya, wild animal, that would include a lion, that goes into the courtyard of a nizak and kills, that means with its teeth, an animal and eats it, you have to pay a full amount. So why should he have to pay a full amount? This is an unusual way of it killing, and therefore that should be considered goring. The answer is Hachab Maiskenan Shetarfa Lehaniach. This Baraita is talking about a case where the animal did tear it apart, it's true, with his teeth, but not to eat right away, but rather to leave it for later or for its kids. And therefore, that's a normal way, that's a typical behavior to kill in order to leave it later, and therefore, since that's typical way of doing things, he is liable. Hold on, ha'achalakatan, it says he ate it. It doesn't say he just killed it, he killed it and ate it. So this would be called an unusual way of eating. And the answer is bishanim lecha v'achla, a kind of funny answer. At first, the lion went and tore with its teeth because it wanted to leave it for later. But then, after it tore it apart, it said, you know what? I'm kind of hungry. This kind of seems smells good, and then just changed its mind and decided to eat it. So even though it ate it by tearing it with its teeth, initially it thought about storing it, and therefore that was a normal behavior, and therefore is chayav. Now we ask, Minayad Inan, how do you know what the animal was thinking? Did you interview it before and after, and you asked it? Did you change your mind? Right? So how could you ever know that? And if you do assume that, in any case, that an animal goes and kills with its teeth, that maybe that was the normal way because it wanted to store it and only then it changed his mind. Well then, in the case of Shemuel made a distinction. Maybe Shemuel's distinction then should not be true. Even if it tears with its teeth and then eats it, it should still be liable because it could be that when it tore with its teeth, it was doing it to store it for later and only then changed its mind and therefore was acting in a normal way. And so if you assume this, then you'll never... first of all, you don't know, and then you'll have to take that into account in all cases, and then there would never be a case where you would make such a distinction. Arav Nachman B'Yitzchak listadin ketane shetarfa lehaniach or darsa v'achala meshalem nezik shalem. So Arav Nachman B'Yitzchak says you have to explain the Mishnah as talking about two different cases. A chaya that went into chatzar hanizak, and it either tore it with his teeth in order to leave for later, or ate it in the normal way by clawing it and ate it. Either of those are its normal, typical ways, and therefore has to pay the full amount. Okay, Ravina Amar, Ki Kamar Shemuel Ba'ari Tarbut V'aliba de Rabbi Elazar Damar Lav Urhe. Ravina has a different explanation for Shemuel, and he says, listen, lions actually, they do eat, and always, they eat by tearing with his teeth, as we said before. That is a typical way for a lion to eat. Don't tell me that's an atypical way for it to kill with his teeth and then eat it. And so instead, Ravina can explain Shemuel's statement by assuming that Shemuel was talking about a domesticated lion. And we're following the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, who makes such a distinction between wild lions and domesticated lions. Because Rabbi Elazar says, if it's domesticated, then it's not its way to go and kill and eat other animals in any way. And therefore, if a domesticated animal should go in the Shut Rabim and kill and do it, and even though it's in a way that's normal for wild animals, but this is a domesticated, trained animal. So it's surprising that this tame lion went and killed something and tore it apart with his teeth, and therefore it is in fact unusual. Since it's unusual, that would be referred to keren, and that would be in the Shut Rabim. Ken the Shut Rabim is chayav. We ask, well, if so, then it shouldn't make any distinction. Even if it clawed, which everyone agrees is the normal way for a wild lion to eat, and there Shemuel said patur if it does it in a normal way, because that would be shen. But if you're talking about a tame lion, then the tame lion, it's unusual for it even to eat in a way that's normal for a wild lion. And since it's unusual, so then it would fall into keren and should be liable. Rather, we got Ravina's statement wrong. We thought he was commenting on Shemuel. In fact, no. Ravina was directly explaining the Baraita. Ki Tame matnita ba'ari tarbut v'adiba de Rabbi Elazar de'amar lav orhe. The Baraita above that said that a chaya, including a lion that goes into chasad hanizak, and tears apart and eats its flesh, has to pay full damage. So why is that? That's what Avina was explaining, and he said that's talking about a tame lion, and he was following the opinion of Rabbi Elazar that a tame lion, once it's tame, it's not its typical way to go and attack an animal and eat it. And therefore, if it does go and do that, that's unusual, so therefore it's a subcategory of keren. Keren, b'reshut hanizak, is liable. We ask about that. If it's in fact a tame lion, it should have the same law as a tame ox. And a tame ox in the Reshut HaNizak, although according to the Bitarfon has to pay full amount no matter what, according to Rabbanan, has to only pay half, and let's assume Rabbanan. So why then you should only have to pay half? So why is it saying that you have to pay a full amount? The answer is the Iya'ad. So you got the case here. We have a lion that was tamed, and then it went and gored once, twice, 3 times, and so now it's a tame lion that became forewarned, and so it still has the law of a tame animal in the sense that going and killing is unusual for it, even though it already did this 3 times. But still, it's not called shen, in which case it would be its normal way, but rather it's called keren, which is its unusual way, and therefore it's unusual for it to go and kill an animal in any way, and therefore is liable under keren. Hold on, there's a braita that's going to come up later on Daf Yud Tet that includes this case under a subcategory of shen. But if it's talking about a tame animal, then it shouldn't be under shen. Should be under keren because it's unusual activity for it. Kashya, and we end with a difficulty. You're right. It seems to be wrongly categorized according to this statement of this Ravina's explanation of that baraita. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.